There is a man who inherited a company. He didn't celebrate. He didn't post about it. He sat in his grandfather's chair, the same chair that had been in that office for 60 years, and he read the same book his grandfather had been reading when he died. He finished the chapter first. Then he got to work. That is not a story about arrogance. That is not a story about entitlement. That is a story about a psychology so different from modern culture, so alien to everything we've been taught to want that most people, when they encounter it, don't recognize it for what it is. They think it's coldness. It isn't. It's something far more powerful, and today we're going to break it down. 5 levels. 5 layers of a mind built across generations. A mind that doesn't just think about money differently, it thinks about everything differently. Stay with us. Because by the end of this, you won't just understand old money psychology. You'll understand why you were never supposed to. Level 1. The disappearance of the ego. Here is the first thing you need to understand. Old money is not interested in being seen. This is not false modesty. This is not a strategy. It is a deeply conditioned psychological reality, one that begins in childhood and runs so deep that by adulthood it operates like instinct. The new rich want recognition. They need it. The Lamborghini, the Instagram grid, the table at the restaurant where you know the owner, these are not accidents. They are expressions of an identity that requires external validation to feel real. Old money psychology does not work this way. When your family has held wealth for 3, 4, 5 generations, when your great-grandmother's portrait hangs in a museum and your grandfather's name is on a building you've walked past 1,000 times, you stop needing the world to confirm who you are. You already know. The ego in the old money mind has been quietly retired. Not killed, retired. It doesn't need to perform because it has nothing left to prove. Psychologists call this secure attachment to identity. The rest of us would simply call it knowing exactly who you are, and here's why that matters. When you don't need to perform, you make better decisions. You don't buy things to impress people. You don't take risks to feel alive. You don't chase status because status to you is a permanent inheritance, not a moving target. The ego's disappearance is not the end of ambition. It is the beginning of clarity. Level 2. The relationship with time. Ask someone from new money what they're thinking about and they'll tell you about this quarter, this year, maybe the next 5 years if they're feeling ambitious. Ask someone from old money the same question. They'll tell you about the next 50. This is level 2, and it may be the most psychologically profound difference of all. Old money families do not think in lifetimes. They think in legacies. The frame of reference is not, what will this do for me? It's, what will this do for the family name in 2075? This is not a metaphor. It is a literal cognitive shift. There's a reason why old money families hold assets for generations while new money sells at the first sign of gain. There's a reason why they plant trees they'll never sit under, fund institutions they'll never benefit from, and teach their children lessons that won't pay off for 20 years. Time, for them, is not a resource being spent. Time is the material they build with. Think about what that does to a person psychologically. When you are raised to think in decades, when your parents frame every major decision through the lens of generational consequence, you develop a radical patience that modern culture has completely lost. You stop being reactive. You stop being impulsive. You learn to wait because you know that the right decision made slowly will always outperform the wrong decision made fast. And perhaps most importantly, you stop being afraid of missing out. FOMO cannot exist in a mind calibrated for centuries. Level 3. Discipline as identity, not effort. Here is where it gets uncomfortable, because level 3 is the part that most people misunderstand. They look at old money discipline, the early mornings, the structured days, the refusal to be publicly emotional, the impeccable composure under pressure, and they call it repression. They are wrong. What they are witnessing is not the suppression of natural impulses. It is the replacement of natural impulses with something better. Old money psychology does not practice discipline. Old money psychology is discipline. There is a difference, and it's everything. When you practice discipline, you fight yourself every morning. You drag yourself out of bed. You resist the urge to spend, to react, to collapse. It costs energy. It creates friction. And eventually, for most people, the discipline breaks. But when discipline is your identity, When it has been installed over generations as the core operating system of your family, you don't fight yourself. You simply are. The old money child who wakes at 6, dresses properly, sits with good posture, chooses measured words, they're not performing. They're not suppressing. They are expressing exactly who they are. This is what psychologists call identity-based behavior, and it is almost impossible to break from the outside because there's no willpower involved. It doesn't deplete, it doesn't tire, it just runs. And the result is a human being who, in a world of constant distraction and emotional volatility, appears almost supernaturally calm. They are not calmer because life is easier. They are calmer because their psychology was built for turbulence. The storms come for old money families too: crashes, scandals, loss, death. The difference is they were taught from before they could read that the storm is not an emergency. The storm is just weather. Level 4, the philosophy of enough. This is the level that will challenge you the most, because we live in a culture built on more money, more followers, more experiences, more proof that you are living fully. The modern economy runs on dissatisfaction. It needs you to always feel slightly behind, slightly lacking, slightly not enough. Old money psychology has been vaccinated against this. And the vaccine is a philosophy called sufficiency. Not contentment in the passive sense, not settling, not giving up, but a deep structural belief that there is a point at which enough is enough, and that chasing beyond that point is not ambition. It is an addiction. Old money families have a relationship with consumption that looks almost ascetic to outside eyes. The clothes are expensive but few. The house is large but uncluttered. The food is high quality but not theatrical. There is no performance of excess. Because excess signals to the old money mind a fundamental insecurity. Showing off what you have means you're afraid of losing it. Old money is not afraid of losing it. Why? Because the wealth at a certain point becomes almost beside the point. It is infrastructure like electricity or water. You maintain it, you protect it, you grow it with care, but you don't worship it. This philosophical shift has a profound psychological consequence. It makes old money families free in a way that new money rarely is. When you don't need more, you cannot be manipulated by the promise of more. You cannot be rushed into a bad deal. You cannot be seduced by a shortcut. You cannot be controlled by fear of scarcity. Think about that for a moment. In a world where almost every system, advertising, social media, politics, finance, is designed to keep you in a state of perpetual want, what would it feel like to simply not want? To look at the game everyone is playing and quietly, politely choose not to play. That is level 4, and it is rarer than any amount of money. Level 5, the weight of stewardship. We have arrived at the deepest level, the one that takes the longest to understand, and the one that, once understood, changes how you see everything that came before. Old money psychology, at its most fundamental core, is not about wealth. It is about responsibility. Not responsibility in the way we use it casually, as a synonym for obligation or burden, but responsibility in its truest psychological sense, the experience of being answerable to something larger than yourself. The old money heir does not inherit an account balance. They inherit a trust, not a legal trust, though that may exist too, a moral trust, a weight, a voice in their head that belongs to every ancestor who built what now bears their name, and equally, a voice that belongs to every descendant who will one day receive what they leave behind. This is stewardship psychology, and it is the organizing principle of the entire old money worldview. When you are a steward, not an owner, but a steward, you think, feel, and behave differently in ways that touch every corner of your life. You don't consume carelessly because what you consume on behalf of the family. You don't behave recklessly in public because your reputation is not just your own. You don't make short-term decisions because the family's timeline is not your timeline. You are one chapter in a book that started long before you arrived and will continue long after you are gone. And here is the psychological paradox at the heart of all of this. The old money heir who understands stewardship is, in some ways, the least free person in any room. They carry obligations that were never chosen, expectations that were never negotiated, a weight that was simply there on the day they were born. And yet they are also among the most psychologically anchored people alive, because they know exactly who they are. They know exactly what they stand for. They know exactly what their life is for. In a world where identity crisis has become an epidemic, where people spend decades searching for meaning, for purpose, for a reason to get up in the morning, the steward already has their answer. It was given to them at birth. The weight and the freedom are the same thing. The closing, what this really means for you. So, 5 levels. The disappearance of the ego, the long relationship with time, discipline as identity, the philosophy of enough, and the weight of stewardship. Now I want to ask you something, not about old money, about you, because here is the truth that most people never say out loud in these conversations. You don't need to inherit wealth to inherit a psychology. The ego that doesn't need to perform, that can be chosen. It is chosen every day by people who decide that who they actually are is more important than who they look like online. The long view of time that can be practiced. It begins with a single question. What am I building that will outlast me? The discipline that becomes identity that can be built. One decision, repeated, until it stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling like a self. The philosophy of enough that can be adopted. The moment you decide that the algorithm does not get to define your dissatisfaction, you are already free. And stewardship, this is the most important one. Stewardship can be chosen for a family that doesn't yet exist, for children not yet born, for a name that means nothing to anyone today. But it will, if you decide it will. Old money psychology was not built in one generation. Neither will yours be. But it starts, every single dynasty in human history starts with one person who decided to think differently than everyone around them. One person who looked at the noise and chose silence. One person who looked at the crowd and chose depth. One person who decided that what they left behind mattered more than what they showed off today. That person doesn't have to be born into it. They just have to decide. If this changed how you think, even slightly, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're building something, a family, a name, a legacy, leave a comment below. We read everyone. We'll see you in the next one.